Cleveland Indians pitcher Trevor Bauer spent last week going through what many MLB players go through in the offseason, arbitration hearings. The intense hearings feature players and teams debating whether or not they deserve or to either receive or pay a set amount of money based on a player's talent. Bauer explained that he was hurt by the process, equating it to, quote, character assassination. I'm joined by Brad Klier to discuss whether or not Trevor Bauer has a point. So, Brad, do you agree with Trevor Bauer's assessment of this process?
In a way, it is character assassination because from an organizational standpoint, the real basis of arbitration is you're trying to provide reasons why a player should be paid less. And if you want them to be paid less, you're going to throw out negatives. Trevor Bauer mentioned how they brought up his social media use on top of a lot of other things. And what happens a lot with this is that a team is going to take a player who they're going to have to sign to a long-term contract in a few years, or someone who's a pivotal part of their team, and they're going to have to sort of talk negatively or criticize that player in front of them, which could have the effect of alienating that player from his team.
Like an anti-self-interest kind of factor?
Exactly.
Because this is your, one of your best players, and you want him to stay, but you're talking these bad things about him, right?
It's like a double-edged sword because on one hand you want him to stay and you want to pay him the lowest amount, but at the same time you don't want to completely anger him to the point where when it's 3 years from now you no longer have team control and you want to sign him to that 3 or 4 year, 5 year contract. He's kind of like, all right, well, you guys said this about me a few years ago. Maybe I'll go see what I'm worth on the open market. So in a way, it is character assassination because the whole point of it is you're trying to provide reasons to pay someone less money.
Now here's the tricky question. So we know the process. The next question I have for you, is it fair? And if not, how can they fix it?
Oh, I think like it's as fair as it's going to be because arbitration inherently is you have two sides and an independent party, decides what the correct outcome is. I don't think there's anything you can do to the process, and arbitration is so ingrained in Major League Baseball in the 6 years of control. There's nothing they can do to change it. I think what we've seen, though, is teams and players want to avoid it. We saw it with Luis Severino and Aaron Nola signing for low figures, which have set that market down low. That's a different discussion. But you see teams who really want to avoid arbitration, so they're going to either settle right before at like a middle point between their two figures, or they're going to sign a deal that takes up maybe a year or two of free agency, but it gets rid of all the arbitration years, so they don't have to go through that process. Like Luis Severino, he explicitly said that part of the motivation for him signing that contract was he didn't want to go through the arbitration process. And he's getting $10 million a year for the next 4 years, which may be lower than he would have gotten through arbitration. But again, it gets to avoid that sort of negative criticism or character assassination, as Trevor Bauer called it, that comes from arbitration.
Do we have something like this in other sports? Are there equals in, say the NFL, the NBA? Because we don't hear that as much in other leagues, but MLB for sure. Are there other equivalents in other leagues?
To arbitration?
Yeah.
I don't really think there are, no, because, in all these other leagues, you're on an entry-level contract or a rookie contract, and then you're a restricted free agent, which restricts your, freedom, but other teams can sign you to deals which your team can match. In football, there's the franchise tag, which is completely different.
Bring up the franchise tag.
Yeah.
It's same in the way that it feels like disagreements, and that's why that happens,
right? But at the same time, the franchise tag, there's no back and forth because a player can still win an arbitration hearing. When you're franchise tagged, it's just boom, done.
So what happens when you win an arbitration hearing? Very quickly before we leave.
You get paid the figure that you want to be paid, which is most likely going to be
more. Which is ideal, right?
Yes, exactly.
All right. Well, our arbitration process is over. The verdict? Brad is always right. When we come back, we'll discuss the most iconic media duos in sports.